The certified letter trembled in my hands as I stood in our family's cluttered kitchen. Northeastern University, full academic scholarship covering tuition and fees. After 4 years of advanced placement classes, student government, and countless volunteer hours at Boston Children's Hospital, I'd finally achieved what seemed impossible for a middle-class girl from Medford, Massachusetts. I should have been screaming with joy, calling friends, planning my dorm decor. Instead, I felt my chest tighten as the familiar knot of anxiety formed. This scholarship, impressive as it was, only covered tuition. Room and board, textbooks, meal plans, and living expenses would still cost thousands each semester. Money, that was supposed to come from my college fund. The fund my parents had promised was secure. The fund I'd just discovered had been emptied 3 months ago to pay for my brother Ethan's elaborate destination wedding in Santorini. The granite countertop felt cool against my palms as I steadied myself. 22 years of being the responsible Mitchell child had conditioned me to swallow disappointment, to find solutions rather than voice complaints. But this betrayal cut deeper than any before. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Rachel Mitchell. Growing up in our modest colonial home in Medford, my childhood was defined by stark contrasts. While my older brother Ethan charmed his way through life with his easy smile and carefree attitude, I was the studious, fun, the planner, the one who color-coded her calendar in elementary school and started preparing college applications in sophomore year. Rachel always has everything under control, my mother would tell her friends at church, pride evident in her voice. What sounded like praise was actually the foundation of a troubling family dynamic. One where my competence became the reason my needs could be sacrificed when Ethan's latest crisis demanded attention. The morning after receiving my acceptance letter, I found my parents at the breakfast table. Dad was hidden behind his newspaper while Mom stirred oatmeal on the stove, the same routine they'd maintained for decades. I got accepted to Northeastern, I announced, clutching the letter. Full academic scholarship for tuition. Mom turned, wooden spoon in hand, her face lighting up. Rachel, that's wonderful news. She hurried over to hug me, oatmeal momentarily forgotten. Dad lowered his newspaper, his eyes crinkling with genuine pride. That's my girl. Always knew you had it in you. The momentary warmth of their approval almost made me reconsider the conversation I needed to have. Almost. We need to talk about my college fund, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I checked online yesterday and the account is empty. Every dollar, gone. The kitchen fell silent except for the gentle bubbling of oatmeal on the stove. Mom turned quickly to attend to it, though I suspected it was more to avoid my gaze than to prevent burning breakfast. Dad cleared his throat, folding his newspaper with deliberate precision. Rachel, family finances are complex. Sometimes adjustments need to be made for the greater good. Adjustments? I repeated, the word tasting bitter. The entire fund is gone, Dad. All $43,000 that Grandma helped establish when I was born. The money that was specifically designated for my education. Mom returned with 3 bowls of oatmeal, her movements unnaturally precise. Honey, when Ethan and Sophia decided on the wedding in Greece, there were significant deposits required. International venues, you know? The timing was difficult with the housing market downturn affecting your father's real estate business. So you used my college fund? The betrayal felt physical, a hollowness expanding in my chest. Without asking me? Without even telling me? It was meant to be temporary, Dad interjected. Ethan promised he'd repay it before you needed it for college. Sophia's father was supposed to contribute to the wedding, but when he backed out at the last minute, the familiar pattern emerged. Ethan makes impulsive decisions, encounters problems, and my parents sacrifice whatever necessary including my future, to rescue him. And now, I asked, my untouched oatmeal cooling before me, how exactly am I supposed to pay for housing, for books, for basic living expenses? Mom reached across the table to pat my hand. You've always been so resourceful, Rachel. With your scholarship and maybe a part-time job, student loans for the rest? Unlike Ethan, who apparently can't be expected to live within his means or have a destination wedding he can actually afford. The words escaped before I could. Temper them. Dad's expression hardened. That's not fair, Rachel. Your brother has different challenges. He and Sophia needed this fresh start, especially with the baby coming. The baby. The convenient announcement Ethan and Sophia had made just weeks before their engagement, a not-so-subtle pressure tactic that ensured my parents would spare no expense for the wedding. A grandchild was coming. What were education funds compared to that? Did Ethan know? I asked quietly. Did he know where the money for his wedding came from? The silence that followed was answer enough. That evening, I sat cross-legged on my childhood bed, laptop balanced on my knees as I researched student loan options, work-study programs, and private grants. The practical part of me, the part that had earned straight A's and perfect attendance, awards, knew there were pathways forward. Difficult, debt-laden pathways, but options nonetheless. A text from my best friend Zoe illuminated my phone screen. Northeastern. We're officially going to be roomies. Have you told your parents? Are they freaking out? Zoe's parents had been saving for her college fund since before she was born. Her future was secure, her housing deposit already submitted. She had no idea that mine now hung in the balance. I typed back a non-committal, "They're proud. Details. Tomorrow?" Before returning to my research, a soft knock interrupted my concentration. Mom entered bearing a mug of chamomile tea, her universal gesture of conciliation since I was young. "I thought you might need this," she said, placing the steaming mug on my nightstand. Her eyes fell on my laptop screen, crowded with scholarship applications and loan calculators. "Oh, Rachel." "I'm figuring it out," I said, instinctively minimizing the windows. Years of being the low-maintenance child had trained me not to burden others with my problems. Mom sat hesitantly at the edge of my bed. "Your father and I have been talking. We know this isn't what we promised you." She twisted her wedding band nervously, a habit that emerged whenever family tensions rose. "We're going to help however we can. Maybe we could take out a home equity loan or the housing deposit is due in 2 weeks," I interrupted. $2,800 for the first semester in the honors dorm where Zoe and I applied. I have $1,650 saved from my library job. Mom nodded slowly. "We'll figure something out for the deposit. And then, for the rest, maybe Ethan can contribute once they're back from their honeymoon. He starts his new position at Sophia's uncle's firm next month." The same promises, the same pattern. Ethan would always be prioritized, his obligations minimized, his responsibilities deferred. "Mom," I said carefully, "have Ethan's previous promises about money ever actually materialized?" Her silence was telling. After she left, I closed my laptop and reached for the business card I'd tucked inside my desk drawer months ago. Professor Diane Keating had been my AP economics teacher and mentor throughout high school. Before retiring last semester, she'd pressed the card into my hand with instructions to call if I ever needed guidance about college or anything else. Tonight qualified as anything else. Despite the late hour, Professor Keating answered, on the third ring. "Rachel, is everything all right?" The concern in her voice unleashed everything I'd been holding back. The college fund, the wedding, the pattern of sacrifice that always seemed to flow in one direction. As I spoke, the weight that had been crushing my chest began to lighten. When I finished, her response was measured but firm. "Rachel, what your parents did wasn't just unfair. It may have been improper. College funds are often established as custodial accounts with specific legal protections. Do you know how your fund was structured? My grandmother set it up when I was born, I explained. Some kind of education-specific account that had tax benefits. My parents were the custodians, until I turned 18, which was last August. That sounds like a 529 plan or an UGMA account, Professor Keating said. Either way, there are legal considerations when custodians withdraw funds for purposes other than the beneficiary's education or welfare. Do you have any documentation about the account? I didn't, but I knew who might. Grandma Mitchell, my father's mother, had established the fund and made annual contributions until her death 3 years ago. My grandfather, though less involved in financial matters, might have records. This isn't about creating family conflict, Professor Keating continued, sensing my hesitation. It's about understanding your rights and ensuring your educational opportunities aren't compromised by decisions made without your consent. The next morning, instead of continuing my frantic scholarship search, I drove my decade-old Honda Civic to my grandfather's retirement community in Cambridge. At 83, Grandpa Mitchell remained sharp-minded and fiercely independent. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Maintaining the meticulous record-keeping habits from his 40 years as a bank manager. Rachel! He greeted me with a warm hug in the community's sunlit lobby. What a wonderful surprise. Is everything okay? You look troubled. Over coffee? In his small but immaculate apartment, I explained the situation, trying to balance honesty with diplomacy. My grandfather's expression darkened as I spoke, his fingers tightening around his coffee mug. Your grandmother would be heartbroken, he said finally. That account was her gift to you. She believed so strongly in your potential, in education as the foundation for independence. He rose slowly, disappearing into his home office before returning with a leather portfolio. Louise kept copies of everything. She didn't entirely trust digital records, old school that way. Inside the portfolio were account statements, the original establishment documents for what was indeed a 529 education savings plan, and annual contribution records. Most significantly, there was a letter my grandmother had written to be given to me upon my high school graduation, a letter my parents had apparently intercepted. My eyes blurred with tears as I read her words. My dearest Rachel, as you stand at the threshold of your adult life, I want you to know how deeply I believe in your future. The education fund your grandfather and I established is our investment in that future. A future where your independence and intellectual growth will never be compromised by financial constraints. Use it wisely, knowing it comes with all our love and the highest expectations for the remarkable woman you are becoming. Grandpa watched me read, his own eyes glistening. Louise always said you had her spirit, practical but passionate about justice. With trembling hands, I examined the account documents more carefully. The terms were explicit. The funds were designated exclusively for qualified educational expenses for Rachel Louise Mitchell. As custodians, my parents had signed agreements, acknowledging their fiduciary responsibility. They emptied it for Ethan's wedding, I said quietly. A beach ceremony in Santorini with 60 guests, 5-star accommodations, a photographer flown in from Paris. Grandpa's jaw tightened. That's not just disappointing, it's potentially actionable. A breach of fiduciary duty. I don't want to sue my parents, I clarified quickly. Of course not, he agreed. But sometimes the awareness that legal options exist creates leverage for more amicable resolutions. He patted my hand reassuringly. Let me make some calls. Your cousin Meredith is an estate attorney. She'll know exactly what options we have. As I drove home, the portfolio of documents secure in my passenger seat, I felt a shift in my perspective. For years, I'd accepted my role as the family member whose needs could be deferred, whose resources could be redirected, whose protests could be dismissed because I was the responsible one. Now, armed with knowledge and the memory of my grandmother's faith in me, I recognized this pattern for what it was, an injustice that required correction. When I arrived home, Ethan's Tesla was parked in the driveway, an extravagant purchase financed by our parents co-signing the loan last year. He and Sophia had returned early from their 3-week honeymoon, presumably because funds had run short. Inside, I found them in the living room with my parents, Sophia's baby bump now prominently displayed beneath a designer maternity dress. They were laughing over honeymoon photos projected onto our modest television screen, whitewashed villas against azure seas, elegant dinners illuminated by sunset, champagne toasts on private terraces. My college fund, frame by frame. "Rachel," Ethan called when he noticed me lingering in the doorway. "Come see these incredible shots from the hotel in Oya. The infinity pool practically merged with the Aegean. Worth every penny of my future." "Actually," I said, my voice steadier than I expected, "we need to talk, all of us." Something in my tone caused the laughter to fade. My father reached for the remote, pausing on an image of Ethan and Sophia enjoying a candlelit dinner on a cliffside restaurant. "What's going on?" Ethan asked, his easy smile faltering slightly. I placed Grandma's portfolio on the coffee table. "I visited Grandpa today. He helped me understand some things about my college fund, the one that was emptied for your wedding." Sophia shifted uncomfortably on the sofa, one hand protectively covering her stomach, as if my words might somehow harm her unborn child. "Rachel," my mother began, her voice taking on the placating tone she used when trying to smooth over family tensions. "We've already discussed this. We're going to find a way to help with your expenses." "Like the way you've found to help with all of Ethan's expenses?" I countered. "The Tesla lease? The credit card bailout last Christmas? The rent subsidies for his downtown apartment before he moved in with Sophia?" Ethan's face reddened. "That's not fair. I've had some bad breaks." "This isn't about your bad breaks," I interrupted, opening the portfolio to display the account documentation. "This is about a legally established education fund with explicit terms that was misappropriated for your destination wedding. A fund that Grandma Mitchell established specifically for my college expenses." My father stood abruptly. "Rachel, you're being dramatic. Family finances are fluid. We allocate resources where they're needed most at any given time." "Except they weren't your resources to allocate," I said, removing the original account establishment papers. "This 529 plan was created for a specific beneficiary, me, with legally binding terms that you signed as custodians. Using it for anything other than qualified education expenses wasn't just unfair. According to Cousin Meredith, it constitutes a breach of fiduciary duty." The mention of our attorney cousin caused visible alarm in my father's expression. "You spoke to Meredith?" he asked, his voice strained. "Grandpa did," I clarified. "She was quite clear about my options." "Options?" my mother echoed faintly. "I could pursue legal action," I said, watching their faces carefully. "Request an audit of the account, file for damages, potentially even involve tax authorities since 529 withdrawals for non-educational purposes carry penalties." Sophia gasped softly. Ethan's casual posture had completely dissolved, replaced by uncharacteristic rigidity. "Or," I continued, "we can resolve this as a family, with a formal agreement to restore my education fund before the housing deposit deadline in 2 weeks, followed by a structured plan to address the remaining balance." The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the gentle hum of the paused television where Ethan and Sophia's honeymoon bliss remained frozen on the screen. "You would sue your own parents?" Ethan finally asked, incredulity evident in his voice. "Over money? You would take your sister's education fund for a luxury wedding?" I countered. Knowing exactly what it was for? Knowing what it meant for my future? His gaze dropped to his expensive leather shoes, another gift from our parents. I didn't, he began, but faltered. I didn't think about it that way. That's the problem, I said quietly. No one in this family thinks about how these decisions affect me because I've always been expected to adapt, to understand, to find another way. I'm done accepting that role. My father sank back onto the sofa, the weight of realization visibly settling over him. Rachel, we never meant to harm your future. We genuinely believed Ethan would repay the money quickly, that Sophia's father would contribute as promised. Intent doesn't erase impact, I said, recalling Professor Keating's words from one of her lectures on economic justice. And patterns don't change without intervention. For the next 3 hours, we negotiated. Initially tense, the conversation gradually evolved into something more honest than our family had experienced in years. My mother admitted the fear of disappointing Ethan that had driven many of their financial decisions. My father's expression shifted from defensive to defeated as he looked at the documentation spread across our coffee table. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Ethan finally spoke up. I had no idea the money came from your college fund, Rachel, he said, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. Mom and Dad just said they'd handle the wedding expenses when Sophia's father backed out. Would it have made a difference if you had known? I asked, genuinely curious. Ethan hesitated, glancing at his new wife whose diamond ring caught the light as she nervously twisted it around her finger. I'd like to think so. Sophia cleared her throat. We can help repay it, she offered quietly. Once the baby comes, and we're settled, maybe in a year or... I need it in 2 weeks, I reminded her. The housing deposit is due, and the remaining balance for the semester shortly after. My mother wiped away tears that had begun streaming down her face. We'll find a way, Rachel. Your father and I will figure something out. How? I challenged. Dad's real estate business is struggling. You're still paying off the loan for Ethan's Tesla. Where exactly is this money going to come from? My father stood up and paced the room, hands clasped behind his back in the posture he adopted when thinking deeply. We could take out a home equity loan. The house has appreciated considerably since we refinanced last year. Another loan? I shook my head. That's just shifting debt around, not addressing the actual problem. Ethan suddenly sat up straighter. What about the lakeside property? The investment lot you bought in New Hampshire? My parents exchanged a meaningful glance. The vacation property at Lake Winnipesaukee had been their retirement dream, a place to build a small cabin where grandchildren could spend summers. They'd purchased the undeveloped land 15 years ago, making small payments that had finally resulted in outright ownership last year. We could sell it, my father said slowly. Property values around the lake have tripled since we bought it. No, I said immediately, surprising even myself. That's your retirement dream. I don't want that sacrifice. My mother reached for my hand. Rachel, dreams can change. What can't change is our responsibility to you. We made a terrible mistake, allowing your brother's needs to overshadow yours yet again. She looked at Ethan pointedly. A pattern that stops now. Ethan shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. Maybe I could sell the Tesla, he suggested, though his reluctance was evident. Get something more practical, especially with the baby coming. The irony wasn't lost on me. His willingness to sell a luxury car he shouldn't have purchased in the first place was presented as a noble sacrifice. There's another option, my grandfather said, speaking for the first time since I'd begun presenting the documentation. He'd been so quiet during our conversation that his voice startled everyone. The Mitchell Family Trust. My father's head snapped up. Dad, that's not accessible until circumstances warrant, Grandpa finished firmly. Your mother and I established that trust as a financial safety net for genuine emergencies and important family milestones. Rachel's education qualifies." He turned to me, his eyes gentle but determined. "Louise always said education was the one investment that could never be taken away from you. This situation would break her heart, but accessing the trust to restore, your college fund would honor her intentions." Tears pricked at my eyes. While I had visited Grandpa seeking information, I hadn't expected him to offer a solution that would preserve both my educational future and my parents' retirement dreams. "How much is in the trust?" Ethan asked, earning him sharp looks from both our parents. "Enough," Grandpa replied curtly, "though not enough to cover any more destination weddings or luxury vehicles." The pointed comment hung in the air until my father cleared his throat. "Dad, are you certain about this? The trust was intended to last through multiple generations." "And it will," Grandpa assured him. "But right now, we need to correct a wrong. Rachel's education fund will be restored from the trust, with the explicit understanding that your family will address the deeper issues at play here." He fixed my parents with the stern look I remembered from childhood holidays when adult conversations turned serious. "This isn't just about money. It's about fairness, responsibility, and the messages you're sending to both your children." My mother nodded, tears flowing freely now. "We understand." "Do you?" Grandpa challenged. "Because from where I sit, you've taught Rachel that her responsibility is punished, while Ethan's irresponsibility is rewarded. That's a lesson that damages both of them." The harsh truth of his words settled over the room. I had never heard anyone articulate so precisely the dynamic that had shaped our family for years. "I'd like all of you to consider family counseling," Grandpa continued. "Not just for this financial situation, but for the underlying patterns. Louise and I made our share of parenting mistakes, but we always strived for fairness." My father rubbed his temples, a gesture I'd seen countless times when he felt overwhelmed. "You're right, Dad. This goes beyond the money." The conversation continued late into the evening, transitioning from the immediate financial crisis to deeper discussions about family dynamics, expectations, and the path forward. By the time we finished, we had a concrete plan. My college fund would be restored through the Mitchell Family Trust within 10 days, ensuring I could secure housing at Northeastern. Additionally, my parents committed to family counseling, and even Ethan reluctantly agreed to participate. As everyone prepared to leave, Ethan approached me in the hallway, his usual confidence notably absent. "I'm sorry, Rachel. I've been so wrapped up in my own life that I never considered how it affected yours." "It's not entirely your fault," I admitted. "Mom and Dad created this dynamic. We both just played the roles we were assigned." He nodded, thoughtfully. "Maybe it's time we both tried different roles." The next morning, I woke to find an envelope slipped under my bedroom door. Inside was a cashier's check for $3,000 with a note in Ethan's handwriting. "For your housing deposit. It's not everything, but it's a start. The Tesla goes on the market today." A small step, perhaps, but significant coming from a brother who had never before acknowledged his part in the family's financial favoritism. The following weeks brought rapid changes. Grandpa worked with the family trust attorney to release funds, restoring my college fund to its original balance, plus the growth it would have accrued. My housing deposit was submitted on time, securing my place in the honors dormitory with Zoe. Ethan sold his Tesla, purchasing a sensible pre-owned sedan instead, and using the difference to contribute further to my educational expenses. Most significantly, our family began weekly counseling sessions with Dr. Eleanor Winters, a family therapist specializing in financial dynamics. In our third session, she introduced an exercise that proved particularly revealing. "I'd like each of you to write down what you believe is expected of you in this family," Dr. Winters instructed, distributing note cards. "Not what you want or what you think should be expected, but what you've internalized as your role." My response came easily: to be self-sufficient, to need less, to understand when family resources go to Ethan, to achieve academically without requiring emotional or financial support. Ethan's response was equally telling: to be likable, to provide entertainment and stories, to represent the family socially, to have big dreams, even if they're impractical. Our parents' reactions to reading these perceptions aloud were profound. My mother wept openly, while my father sat in stunned silence, the reality of what they had created finally sinking in. "This is powerful," Dr. Winters noted. "You've each absorbed very different messages about your value and role in the family. Rachel, you've learned that your competence means you deserve less support. Ethan, you've learned that your charm entitles you to more resources without corresponding responsibility. How do we fix this?" my father asked quietly. "By recognizing it first," Dr. Winters replied. "Then by making conscious choices to rebalance the dynamic. It won't happen overnight, but awareness is the essential first step." Over the summer, these sessions continued, gradually shifting our family interactions in subtle but important ways. My parents began consulting me about financial matters that affected the family. Ethan started taking genuine responsibility for his choices, including creating a budget with Sophia for the baby's expenses rather than assuming our parents would cover everything. In August, move-in day at Northeastern arrived. Unlike many of my peers who had one or both parents helping them settle into dorm life, I had my entire family plus Grandpa in attendance. We formed an efficient assembly line, carrying storage, bins and bedding up to my fourth-floor room where Zoe had already claimed the bed by the window. "Your family's going all out," she whispered as Ethan and my father assembled a desk lamp, while my mother organized my closet and Grandpa supervised the proper arrangement of my textbooks. "It's new for all of us," I explained, watching the unfamiliar but welcome scene of my entire family working together to support my journey. As we finished setting up my half of the dorm room, my mother pulled me aside, pressing an envelope into my hands. "This is from all of us," she said softly. Inside was a debit card connected to a new account, separate from my restored college fund, with a note explaining it held an emergency reserve of $5,000 for unexpected expenses or opportunities. No strings attached, no permission needed. Your safety net, your decision. The gesture, small in some ways but enormous in its meaning, represented the first real acknowledgement that I deserved the same security and autonomy that had always been extended to Ethan. That night, after my family departed and the dorm settled into its first evening rhythm, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. Instead of continuing my scholarship applications, no longer needed but a habit hard to break, I began writing in the journal Dr. Winters had suggested I keep. Today feels like the beginning of a new chapter, not just because I've moved into my college dorm, but because for the first time I feel seen by my family. Not as the responsible one who needs less, but as a daughter and sister worthy of the same investment and emotional support always given to Ethan. My freshman year at Northeastern unfolded more smoothly than I had dared to hope during those dark days after discovering my empty college fund. The restored financial support meant I could focus fully on my studies rather than working multiple jobs. I excelled academically, making the dean's list both semesters and securing a coveted research assistant position in the economics department for my sophomore year. But more meaningful than the academic success was the continued evolution in my family's dynamics. Our counseling sessions became monthly rather than weekly, but the principles we'd established continued to guide our interactions. My parents consulted me before making significant financial decisions that might affect the family. Ethan, now a father to baby Emma, demonstrated growing maturity in his approach to finances and responsibility. Throughout that year, Ethan and Sophia struggled to find suitable housing that they could afford on their own. They had been living in a small apartment near Sophia's parents, but with Emma's arrival, the space felt increasingly inadequate. My parents, true to their commitment to change, resisted the urge to solve the problem for them financially, instead offering babysitting help and emotional support while Ethan worked through the challenge himself. During winter break of my freshman year, while helping my mother prepare Christmas dinner, I overheard a conversation between Ethan and our father in the living room. "It's perfect, Dad," Ethan was saying enthusiastically. 4 bedrooms, fenced. Yard, finished basement, in the Oak Ridge School District. We could live there for years, especially if we have another child. "Sounds ideal," my father replied cautiously. "What's the asking price?" "That's the incredible part," Ethan continued. "It's going to auction next month. Foreclosure situation. The starting bid is way below market value. With my new promotion at work, I think we could manage it." My father's voice remained measured. "Have you spoken with a mortgage broker about pre-approval? Checked what property taxes would be? Considered maintenance costs?" I paused in my vegetable chopping, surprised by my father's practical questions rather than his usual enthusiastic support of Ethan's dreams. "Well, not exactly," Ethan admitted. "But I thought maybe you could help with some of that. Maybe cosign if the bank needs additional security." There it was. The familiar request for parental bailout, just packaged differently. "Son," my father said gently but firmly, "your mother and I believe in your ability to handle this. On your own. You have a good job. Sophia's returning to work part-time, and you've been building your credit. If this house is meant to be yours, you'll find a way to make it happen within your own means." The silence that followed was profound. "And if I can't?" Ethan finally asked, his voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Then perhaps it's not the right house at the right time," my father replied. "That doesn't mean you've failed. It means you're making responsible decisions based on your actual circumstances rather than wishful thinking." I nearly dropped the knife I was holding. This measured, realistic response from our father, who had previously enabled Ethan's every impulsive decision, represented a seismic shift in our family system. That evening, after dinner, Ethan approached me as I was washing dishes. "Can I talk to you about something?" he asked, uncharacteristically hesitant as he picked up a dish towel to help dry. "Of course," I replied, curious about this new, more subdued version of my brother. "There's this house going to auction next month," he began, describing the property he'd mentioned to our father. "It's everything Sophia and I have dreamed of, but Dad thinks it might be beyond our reach financially." I rinsed a plate before handing it to him. "What do you think?" He sighed, carefully drying the dish. "I think he might be right, and that terrifies me. I've always jumped into things assuming they'd work out somehow, usually because Mom and Dad would make sure they did. And now? Now I have Emma to think about. I can't just chase every shiny object and hope for the best." He set the dried plate in the cabinet. "You've always been good with numbers. With planning. Would you look at our finances? Help me figure out if this house is actually possible or just another impulsive Ethan Mitchell fantasy." The request, sincere and humble, was so unexpected that I momentarily forgot to turn off the running water. "You want my help? With a financial decision?" "Why is that so shocking?" he asked, then immediately answered his own question. "Right. Because I've always acted like I knew better than everyone else while simultaneously making terrible financial choices." I laughed at his self-awareness. Something like that. "I'm trying to do better, Rachel. For Emma, for Sophia, and honestly, for myself too. Watching you handle the college fund situation with such maturity made me realize how childish I've been about money my whole life." We spent the next several evenings reviewing Ethan and Sophia's finances, their income, expenses, savings, and credit scores. I created spreadsheets modeling various mortgage scenarios and calculating what they could realistically afford. The numbers were sobering. Even at the auction's starting bid, this particular house would stretch you dangerously thin, I concluded, showing him the projections. The mortgage payments alone would take nearly 45% of your combined income. And that's before property taxes, insurance, and maintenance costs. Ethan's disappointment was evident, but he nodded thoughtfully. So it's not just Dad being cautious. The math actually doesn't work. Not for this house, I agreed. But look at this alternative scenario. I showed him another spreadsheet I'd prepared, featuring more modest homes in the same school district that had recently sold. These properties would put you at a much healthier 28-32% of income for housing costs, leaving room for savings, emergencies, and, occasionally ordering pizza without having a financial crisis. To my surprise, Ethan laughed. When did my little sister get so wise about real estate? Probably around the same time I had to fight for my college fund, I replied lightly, though the words carried a weight we both recognized. He reached over and squeezed my hand. I'm sorry about that, Rachel. Really. I don't think I can ever apologize enough. It's not about apologies anymore, I said honestly. It's about growth, and I think you're growing up, Ethan Mitchell. He smiled ruefully. Better late than never, right? The conversation marked another milestone in our evolving relationship. One where Ethan began to see me not just as his responsible little sister, but as someone with valuable insights worth respecting. Spring semester of my freshman year brought new challenges and opportunities. I declared a double major in economics and data science, drawn to the intersection of financial systems and analytical problem solving. Perhaps my experience with our family's financial drama had influenced my academic interests more than I realized. I rarely went home on weekends, preferring to immerse myself in campus life and the independence I'd fought so hard to secure. Zoe and I had settled into a comfortable routine in our dorm room, supporting each other through late-night study sessions and the occasional crisis of confidence that seemed inevitable in a competitive university environment. My phone buzzed one Tuesday afternoon as I was leaving my advanced econometrics class. Ethan's name flashed on the screen, an unusual occurrence, as our communication typically happened during scheduled family video calls on Sundays. Rachel? He said when I answered, his voice tense. I need your advice again. About the house situation. I ducked into a quiet corner of the student center. I thought we established that the Oak Ridge property was out of your price range. Not that. One, he clarified. We took your advice and started looking at more modest options. But there's something else. Something unexpected. My brother's uncharacteristic hesitation piqued my interest. Go on. Dad called me this morning. Apparently the dream house I was fixated on? The bank just listed it for auction next week. Starting bid dropped another 15% because they want to move it quickly. That still doesn't make it affordable for you, I reminded him gently. I know, he said, surprising me. That's not why I'm calling. Dad wants to buy it as an investment property. He'd rent it to us at a rate we can actually afford until we're in a position to buy it from him in a few years. I felt a familiar knot forming in my stomach. After months of progress, was our father reverting to old patterns of financial rescue? What did you tell him? I asked carefully. Ethan's sigh carried through the phone. That's why I'm calling you. My old self would have jumped at the offer without a second thought, but Dr. Winters has been helping me recognize my patterns. This feels like sliding back into dependency, even though part of me is screaming to accept. A wave of pride washed over me. The fact that Ethan was questioning this arrangement instead of eagerly accepting it represented genuine growth. Have you talked to Sophia about it? She's conflicted too, he admitted. On one hand, it would give Emma a stable home in a great neighborhood. On the other, it feels like we'd be failing at adult independence again. I considered the situation carefully. This might actually be different from past patterns if structured correctly. Investment properties can be legitimate financial decisions when the numbers work. The question is whether Dad is doing this primarily as a sound investment or as a backdoor bailout. How do we tell the difference? The terms would make it clear, I explained. A legitimate landlord-tenant relationship would involve market-rate rent, a proper lease, security deposit, and clear expectations about maintenance responsibilities. There would be no special treatment just because you're family. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Would you help me draft those terms? Something fair that protects both sides? I want to approach this like a business arrangement, not a family favor. The request confirmed how far we'd come in rebalancing our family dynamics. I'll help, but I think we should also loop in Grandpa for his expertise. And I'd want to review the financials to make sure this makes sense for Dad, too. He shouldn't put his retirement at risk. Agreed, Ethan said firmly. And if the numbers don't work, we walk away, no matter how perfect the house seems. 2 days later, I took the train home for an impromptu family financial summit. Grandpa joined us at the dining room table where we spread out property information, mortgage calculations, and rental market analyses. The investment aspect actually makes sense, Grandpa concluded after reviewing my father's figures. Property values in that neighborhood have appreciated consistently, even during market downturns. The rental income would cover the mortgage, plus generate a small positive cash flow. My father nodded, visibly relieved. That was my analysis too. But I wanted objective confirmation that this isn't just me finding a way to help Ethan while pretending it's a business decision. The key is in the execution, I pointed out. If you treat this exactly as you would any other investment property, with proper documentation and clear boundaries, it could be a win-win situation. Ethan and Sophia exchanged glances before Sophia spoke up. We've discussed this extensively, and we have a proposal. She slid a folder across the table. We've drafted a rental agreement with terms we believe are fair to everyone. My father opened the folder, eyebrows rising as he reviewed the document. This is thorough. Rachel helped us research standard rental terms, Ethan explained. We're proposing a 2-year lease at $1,250 monthly, which is market rate, for comparable properties. We'll cover all utilities and minor maintenance under $500. We'll pay a security deposit equal to first and last month's rent. No special treatment. The pride in my father's eyes was unmistakable as he looked at his son. This is remarkably responsible, Ethan. There's one more thing, Sophia added, reaching for her husband's hand. We want a right of first refusal, in the contract, but with a specific condition. If we want to purchase the house from you in the future, we'll need to qualify for financing on our own merits. No cosigning, no family loans. The room fell silent as the significance of their stance registered. Ethan and Sophia were deliberately closing the safety net that had always been available to them, insisting on standing on their own financial feet. Are you sure? My mother asked softly. That's a very firm boundary. We're sure, Ethan said with newfound confidence. We've been enabling our own dependency for too long. This arrangement gives us stability for Emma while we build our financial foundation properly. By the end of the 2-year lease, we'll either qualify to buy the house legitimately, or we'll recognize it's not meant to be ours. Grandpa cleared his throat, emotion making his voice slightly rough. Your grandmother would be proud of both of you, he said, glancing between Ethan and me. She always believed financial independence was the foundation of personal dignity. The auction was scheduled for the following Tuesday. My father registered as a bidder with a maximum budget we had all agreed upon in advance. I returned to campus but kept my phone close throughout my morning classes, waiting for news. The text came at 11:43 a.m. We got it, $30K under market value. Closing in 30 days. The carefully structured arrangement proceeded exactly as planned. My father purchased the house as an investment property with a 25% down payment. Ethan and Sophia signed the formal lease we had drafted, including all the accountability measures they had insisted upon. They moved in 3 weeks after closing, sending photos of Emma exploring her new backyard with the kind of joy only a toddler can express over simple pleasures like dandelions and garden hoses. As spring turned to summer, I secured a prestigious internship at the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston. The position was competitive and paid well, allowing me to build both my resume and my personal savings. I rented a small studio apartment near the office instead of returning home, another step in my own journey toward complete independence. Ethan and I spoke regularly now, our relationship evolving into something neither of us had experienced before, a balanced, mutually respectful adult friendship. He sent me photos of improvements they were making to the rental property, a vegetable garden they'd planted with Emma's help, bookshelves they'd built for the nursery, a kitchen, backsplash they'd installed themselves. We're treating it like our own, he explained during one of our calls. Even though technically it isn't yet. We're learning all these home maintenance skills that Dad always handled for us growing up. That's the right approach, I encouraged him. Build equity through knowledge even before you build financial equity. One weekend in July, I visited them at the house, bringing a houseplant as a belated housewarming gift. The transformation wasn't just in the physical space, which they had made genuinely lovely on a modest budget, but in Ethan and Sophia themselves. There was a groundedness to them now, a quiet pride that came from meeting their responsibilities through their own efforts rather than parental rescues. Emma, now nearly 18 months old, toddled around the living room showing me her favorite toys with solemn importance. Watching my brother interact with his daughter, I saw none of the entitlement or impulsivity that had characterized him for so long. He was present, attuned, and delightfully playful without being the center of attention. "She's changed you," I observed as we sat on the back patio, while Emma napped and Sophia took a well-deserved shower. Ethan nodded, his expression thoughtful. Having someone completely dependent on me for everything, it forced me to grow up in ways nothing else could. I look at her and think about the example I'm setting. I don't want her to learn the lessons I did about money and responsibility. "Like what?" I prompted. "That problems magically disappear when you charm the right people. That financial consequences are optional if you know how to work the system, that someone will always bail you out." He shook his head ruefully. "I don't want Emma to face the harsh awakening I did when I realized the real world doesn't operate that way." I sipped my lemonade, letting his words settle between us. "You know what's remarkable? You figured this out at 30. Some people never do." "I had help," he acknowledged. "Dr. Winters, Grandpa, Mom and Dad finally setting boundaries." He gave me a significant look. "And my little sister refusing to be the family sacrifice anymore." The comment caught me off guard. "Is that how you see what happened with my college fund?" "Isn't it?" he challenged gently. "You were literally going to be sacrificed on the altar of my elaborate wedding. If you hadn't stood up for yourself, drawn that line in the sand, where would any of us be now?" The question lingered with me, long after I returned to Boston. Where indeed would we all be if I had accepted my role as the responsible one who figures it out one more time? If I had silently taken on student loan debt while watching my brother celebrate his wedding on a Grecian Isle? If I had continued the pattern that had defined our family for decades? My sophomore year began with a new sense of purpose. Beyond excelling in my double major, I joined the Financial Literacy Initiative, a student organization that provided basic money management education to local high schools, teaching teenagers about budgeting, saving, and the responsibilities that came with credit cards. Felt like turning my family's painful experiences into something constructive. In October, an unexpected opportunity appeared in my university email. A semester abroad at the London School of Economics, specifically for students in my dual major program. The academic benefits were obvious, but the costs were significant, even with a partial scholarship attached to the opportunity. My immediate reaction was to dismiss it as financially out of reach. This ingrained response, The automatic self-limitation that came from years of putting my needs last gave me pause. I had worked hard to change these patterns in my family. Was I still holding them in myself? That evening, I called Grandpa for advice. "The London program sounds remarkable," he said after I'd explained the opportunity. "What's holding you back?" "Mainly the cost," I admitted. Even with my savings from the internship and the partial scholarship, I'd need about $8,000 more to cover housing and living expenses. "And that feels uncomfortable to you? Spending money on your education and experiences?" His perceptive question cut straight to the heart of my hesitation. I guess I'm still adjusting to the idea that investing in myself is valid, that my dreams deserve financial backing too. "Rachel," Grandpa said gently, "this is exactly the purpose of education funds and family support. Not extravagant weddings, not luxury cars, but opening doors to genuine opportunities for growth and learning." After our call, I researched the program more thoroughly, created a detailed budget, and prepared a presentation outlining the academic and career benefits. Then I scheduled a video call with my parents. Their response surprised me completely. "We were hoping you'd apply for this," my mother said, sharing her screen to show emails she'd exchanged with my academic advisor. "Professor Chen reached out to us last month to make sure we were aware of the opportunity. She specifically recommended you for the program." "You've been discussing my academic options with my advisor?" I asked, unsure whether to feel supported or managed. "Not exactly," my father clarified. "She contacted us as part of the university's parent engagement initiative, but only after you'd been shortlisted for the program. We didn't want to influence your decision, but we've been hoping you'd bring it up." "The thing is," I began carefully, "even with the partial scholarship, it would require significant additional funding." My parents exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. "We've been anticipating this," my mother said. "After everything that happened with your college fund, we started a separate savings account specifically for educational enrichment opportunities like this one." My father nodded. "We want to be clear. This isn't about guilt or making up for past mistakes. It's about properly prioritizing family resources toward meaningful investments in both our children's futures." Their thoughtful approach, neither dismissive of the costs nor automatically solving the problem for me, reflected how far we had all come. "I'd want to contribute from my internship savings," I said firmly. "Partnership, not dependency. We wouldn't have it any other way," my father agreed with evident pride. The London semester was arranged for the following spring. As winter break approached, I found myself anticipating our family Christmas with genuine warmth, rather than the complex mix of love and resentment that had characterized previous gatherings. Arriving home, I noticed subtle changes that reflected our family's ongoing evolution. The conspicuous consumption that had once defined our celebrations had been replaced with more meaningful traditions. Instead of the lavish gift exchanges of previous years, where Ethan typically received the lion's share of parental generosity, my mother had organized a secret Santa system with strict spending limits and thoughtful gifting guidelines. Christmas Eve dinner was at Ethan and Sophia's house, their first time hosting a family holiday. The meal was simple but lovely, with Emma helping to serve roles she had apparently helped shape, their irregular forms evidence of toddler participation. Sophia had decorated with homemade touches rather than expensive store-bought items, creating a warmth that felt more genuine than the elaborate displays of previous years. After dinner, as we gathered in their cozy living room with its modest Christmas tree, Ethan cleared his throat. "We have an announcement," he said, taking Sophia's hand. "We've qualified for our own mortgage." The significance wasn't lost on anyone present. Just 18 months after nearly accepting another parental bailout, they had achieved financial stability on their own terms. "We've been working with a financial counselor," Sophia explained, "building our credit, saving consistently, living within our means. The loan officer actually commented on how unusual our application was, Ethan added with a touch of pride. Most first-time home buyers max out what they can borrow. We deliberately stayed well under that threshold to ensure we have room for savings and unexpected expenses. My father's eyes glistened with unshed tears. So, you'll be exercising your right of first refusal in the lease? Ethan nodded. If you're willing to sell to us, we'd like to make this house officially ours. Nothing would make me prouder, my father replied, his voice thick with emotion. We'll have the papers drawn up after the holidays. Later that night, as I helped my mother with dishes while the others played a board game with Emma, she nudged me gently with her elbow. You know you're responsible for this transformation, don't you? I rinsed a serving platter. Everyone played a part. Ethan and Sophia did the actual work. You and Dad established healthier boundaries. Dr. Winters guided us through the process. True, she acknowledged, but none of it would have happened if you hadn't stood your ground that day, if you hadn't valued yourself enough to demand fairness. The observation gave me pause. I had never framed my confrontation about the college fund in terms of self-value, but my mother's perspective resonated deeply. By insisting that my education deserved the same financial backing as Ethan's wedding, I had asserted my inherent worth within our family system. I'm proud of you, Rachel, she continued. Not just for your academic achievements or your London opportunity, but for your courage in challenging us to be better. You've helped heal our entire family. As I prepared to leave for London in January, Ethan and Sophia invited me for a private dinner at their home. After Emma was tucked into bed, Sophia brought out a small wrapped package. After dinner with Ethan and Sophia, I walked out to my car with the small wrapped package they had given me. The necklace inside, a delicate silver compass pendant, was a touching gesture from my brother and sister-in-law. More meaningful than the gift itself was the transformation it represented. 2 years ago, Ethan would never have thought to give me something symbolic and thoughtful. His gifts had always been flashy, expensive, or hastily chosen at the last minute. As I drove back to my apartment, my phone rang through the car's speakers. Grandpa's name appeared on the dashboard display. Rachel, he said when I answered. Are you free for lunch tomorrow before you start packing for London? Absolutely, I replied, curious about the formal invitation. Usually, Grandpa just showed up with sandwiches when he wanted to talk. Excellent. There's something important I'd like to discuss with you. The next day, Grandpa picked me up in his immaculately maintained Buick, a car that was older than me but looked nearly new thanks to his meticulous care. He drove us to Riverside Park, where he produced a picnic basket from the trunk. I thought we'd enjoy the weather, he explained, leading me to a bench overlooking the water. Your grandmother and I used to come here often. As we ate the lunch he'd prepared, chicken salad sandwiches, fresh fruit, and homemade oatmeal, cookies that followed Grandma's recipe, he seemed contemplative, almost hesitant. What's on your mind, Grandpa? I finally asked. He finished his sandwich, carefully folded the waxed paper it had been wrapped in, and turned to face me directly. I've been thinking about family legacies, he began. Not just money or property, but values, lessons, patterns passed from one generation to the next. I nodded, waiting for him to continue. Your grandmother and I worked hard to instill financial responsibility in your father. Somehow, that lesson got diluted along the way. He sighed. Watching what happened with your college fund made me realize we need to be more intentional about protecting what matters. From his jacket pocket, he withdrew an envelope and handed it to me. Inside was a bank statement for an account I didn't recognize, with a balance of $250,000. What is this? I asked, confused. It's what I'm calling an educational security fund, he explained. I've established it for you with a portion of my investments. Unlike your college fund, This account has you as the sole owner and signatory. No one, not your parents, not Ethan, not even me, can access it except you." I stared at him, stunned by the magnitude of the gift. "Grandpa, this is too much." "It's not just for your immediate education," he clarified. "Think of it as seed capital for your future. Graduate school, perhaps, or a down payment on a home when you're ready, or even startup funding if you decide to launch your own enterprise someday. The point is, it's yours to steward as you see fit." The responsibility felt enormous. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll use it wisely," he replied simply. "That you'll remember it represents not just financial resources, but a belief in your judgment and potential." I promised I would, still processing the implications of his gift. This wasn't just money. It was a profound vote of confidence at a time when I was preparing to step fully into adult independence. "There's one more thing," Grandpa continued. "I've updated my estate planning. When the time comes, hopefully many years from now, you'll be named executor of my will and trustee of the family foundation I've established." "But what about Dad?" I asked. "Isn't the eldest child usually given that responsibility?" Grandpa's expression was gentle but firm. "Your father has many wonderful qualities, but financial stewardship hasn't proven to be his strong suit. You've demonstrated wisdom beyond your years in how you handled the college fund situation. That's the kind of discernment needed to manage family resources properly." The responsibility felt weighty but also affirming. For so long, I had been seen as the responsible one in ways that diminished me. The one who needed less, expected less, demanded less. Now that same quality was being recognized as a strength to be honored rather than exploited. "I'll do my best to live up to your trust," I promised. My semester in London transformed me in unexpected ways. Beyond the academic rigor of the London School of Economics, which challenged and expanded my thinking about global financial systems, I discovered parts of myself that had remained dormant in familiar surroundings. Living in a city where no one knew me as the responsible Mitchell daughter or Ethan's sensible sister allowed me to define myself on my own terms. I made friends from around the world, developed interests ranging from modern British theater to urban photography, and even dated briefly. Casual attachments that taught me about connection without the pressure of permanence. Most importantly, I began to recognize how deeply the family dynamics had shaped my identity and decision-making. In twice-monthly video sessions with Dr. Winters, our family therapist who had agreed to continue working with me remotely, I explored how being cast as the capable one had simultaneously empowered and limited me. "I notice I still hesitate before buying anything for pure enjoyment," I admitted during one session. "Last weekend, my classmates invited me to Paris for a quick weekend trip. My first thought wasn't, what an amazing opportunity, but that's an unnecessary expense when I have perfectly good museums here in London." Dr. Winters nodded thoughtfully. The family role of responsible one often comes with internalized messages about deserving less indulgence than others. Have you noticed how this might limit your experiences? The question lingered with me long after our session ended. Was I still punishing myself for needs and desires that I automatically validated in others? Was my pride in financial responsibility sometimes just a mask for deeper insecurities about my worth? These reflections were interrupted by an unexpected email from Professor Chen, my academic advisor at Northeastern. A prestigious summer internship had opened at Goldman Sachs in New York, focusing on sustainable investment strategies. Exactly. The field I had become passionate about during my studies. Professor Chen had submitted my name based on my London performance, and the selection committee wanted to interview me. The opportunity was extraordinary, but would mean another period of professional development rather than income-generating summer work. Despite Grandpa's generous gift and my restored college fund, old habits of financial anxiety surfaced immediately. Instead of calling my parents first, I scheduled a video chat with Zoe, who who had remained my closest friend and confidant. "This internship sounds perfect for you," she said, after I explained the opportunity. "Why do you seem hesitant?" "I'm still struggling with spending money on professional advancement rather than earning income," I admitted. "It feels indulgent somehow." Zoe's expression grew serious. "Rachel, when did investing in your future become an indulgence? Would you consider it indulgent if Ethan pursued a similar opportunity?" Her question cut straight to the heart of my lingering double standard. "No," I acknowledged. "I'd consider it strategic career development." "Then why the different standard for yourself?" she pressed gently. The interview with Goldman Sachs went remarkably well. The panel seemed impressed by my London experience and the research project I'd developed on ethical investing in emerging markets. 2 days later, I received the offer, a paid internship with housing stipend included, eliminating the financial concerns that had initially troubled me. When I called my parents to share the news, their immediate joy and support felt genuine rather than obligatory. There was no hint of comparing my achievement to Ethan's path, no subtle messaging about family resources or priorities. They simply celebrated my success on its own terms. "We're so proud of you, Rachel," my father said warmly, "not just for the opportunity itself, but for how purposefully you're building your future. We've booked flights to visit you in London before the semester ends," my mother added, "and we'd love to help you transition to New York for the summer if you need anything." Their offer of practical support, without overtaking or controlling the situation, represented another step in our family's healing journey. As my London semester neared its end, I received an unexpected message from Ethan asking if we could video chat without Sophia or Emma present. Curious and slightly concerned, I agreed to a call during his lunch break the following day. "Everything okay?" I asked when his face appeared on my screen, the background suggesting he was sitting in his car. "Everything's fine," he assured me. "Better than fine, actually. I wanted to share some news with you first before the whole family knows." For a fleeting moment, I worried he was about to announce another child, a financial commitment that might strain their newly stable situation. Instead, he surprised me completely. "I've been accepted to finish my bachelor's degree," he said, unable to contain his pride. "Evening program at State while continuing my job. 4 semesters to completion since my previous credits transferred." The news was unexpected but wonderful. Ethan had dropped out of college in his junior year, always insisting that formal education was unnecessary for his entrepreneurial ambitions. That he was now choosing to complete his degree represented another significant evolution in his approach to long-term security and growth. "That's fantastic, Ethan," I said genuinely. "What prompted the decision?" He smiled ruefully. "Remember when you helped me analyze our finances for the house purchase? Working through those spreadsheets with you, I realized how much I actually enjoy the analytical side of business when I take the time to understand it. My company has a tuition assistance program for degrees related to our industry, so it makes financial sense too." "I'm really proud of you," I told him, meaning it completely. His expression grew more serious. "There's another reason I wanted to tell you first. Watching you pursue your education with such clarity and purpose. It's been inspiring, Rachel. You've known what you wanted and worked systematically toward it, even when obstacles appeared. I'm trying to approach this degree the same way, methodically, with defined goals rather than vague aspirations." The acknowledgement that my example had influenced his choices in a positive way felt like the closing of a circle that had begun with that devastating discovery of my empty college fund, from being devalued to being explicitly respected as a model worth emulating. When I returned from London in late May, I had a brief window to visit home before beginning the Goldman Sachs internship in New York. My parents had maintained my childhood bedroom exactly as I'd left it, but it felt different now, like visiting a museum of my former self rather than returning to a current identity. The family gathering to welcome me home included Ethan, Sophia, and Emma, who had grown from a toddler to a little person with opinions and personality in the months I'd been away. Watching my niece race around the backyard, directing an elaborate game only she understood, I felt a rush of affection for this next generation of our family, one being raised with healthier financial values and clearer boundaries. "Emma, come say hello to your Aunt Rachel properly," Sophia called, trying to corral her energetic daughter. Emma ran to me, stopping abruptly a foot away to study me with solemn brown eyes. "Did you bring me something from London?" she asked, directly. "Emma," Sophia admonished. "That's not polite." I laughed, charmed by her honesty. Actually, I did. From my bag, I produced a small plush Paddington bear wearing his iconic blue coat and red hat. "This is a very special bear from England. His name is Paddington, and he loves marmalade sandwiches." Emma accepted the gift with unexpected reverence, examining the bear carefully before hugging it to her chest. "Thank you," she said with the precise enunciation of a child who has been coached on manners. Then, more naturally, "Will you read me his story?" "I'd love to," I agreed, pleased that my gift had hit the mark. Later, after Emma had been tucked into bed in the guest room that had been set up for their overnight stay, the adults gathered on the back patio. The early summer evening was perfect, warm but not humid, with fireflies beginning to appear in the gathering dusk. "We have some news," Sophia announced, glancing at Ethan for confirmation before continuing. "We're expecting again, due in January." Congratulations flowed naturally, with my mother immediately launching into plans for a winter baby shower, and my father clapping Ethan on the back with grandfatherly pride. "We've been planning for this," Ethan added, addressing what would have once been the elephant in the room, the financial implications of another child. "We've adjusted our budget, increased our savings rate, and I've been contributing the maximum to my company's dependent care FSA. The detailed financial preparation, so unlike the impulsive Ethan of the past, earned approving nods from everyone, especially Grandpa, who had joined us for dinner. And we've already established a 529 plan," Sophia added. "Just like the one we set up for Emma after learning about Rachel's college fund situation. We want both our children to have educational security from the beginning." The reference to my college fund experience, now viewed as a cautionary tale rather than a source of ongoing tension, demonstrated how fully our family had integrated the lessons of that painful chapter. As the evening progressed, my father raised his glass in a toast. "To Rachel, whose courage in standing up for herself changed our family for the better. And to all of us, for being willing to grow from difficult truths rather than hiding from them." The acknowledgement, public and unambiguous, of how my confrontation had catalyzed positive change felt like a final validation of the stand I had taken 2 years earlier. Later that night, unable to sleep in my childhood bedroom with its mixture of comforting familiarity and growing distance from my current self, I slipped downstairs for a cup of tea. I found my mother already in the kitchen, nursing her own mug, at the island counter. "Jet lag?" she asked sympathetically. I nodded, filling the electric kettle. "That? And it feels strange being back in my old room, like wearing clothes I've outgrown." "You have outgrown it," she observed, "in all the best ways." As I prepared my tea, selecting chamomile from the assortment in the cabinet, my mother watched me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. "What?" I asked, catching her gaze. "I was just thinking about how different things might have been," she said quietly. "If you hadn't confronted us about the college fund, if you had simply accepted it as another example of family resources flowing toward Ethan's needs, if you had taken out loans and carried that burden silently." The alternative timeline she described was all too plausible. Without the catalyst of that confrontation, our family patterns might have continued indefinitely, Ethan requiring and receiving disproportionate support, my needs consistently minimized, my parents enabling one child at the expense of the other. I nearly did that, I admitted, joining her at the counter. The day I found out about the empty account, my first reaction wasn't anger but resignation. I started researching loans immediately, automatically accepting that solving the problem was my responsibility. "What changed?" she asked. I considered the question carefully. I think it was finding Grandma's letter, the one that came with the college fund documentation, reading her words about investing in my future, about ensuring I would never be limited by financial constraints. It made me recognize that accepting what happened would betray her intentions as much as your actions had. My mother winced slightly at the directness of my assessment, but nodded. Louise always did have a clear moral compass. I think you inherited that from her. The ability to recognize when something is fundamentally unfair, even when social pressures encourage you to accept it. I was terrified, I confessed. Walking into that family meeting with the documentation, demanding restoration of the fund. Part of me was convinced I would be labeled selfish, unreasonable, ungrateful. Instead, you were righteous, my mother said simply. And brave enough to be righteous even at the risk of family harmony. That's a rare quality, Rachel. One that will serve you well beyond family dynamics. Her insight resonated with experiences I'd had in London, where I'd observed how financial systems often perpetuated inequities that most people accepted as inevitable rather than challenging directly. Perhaps my willingness to confront unfairness had applications beyond personal circumstances. The Goldman Sachs internship in New York proved even more valuable than I had anticipated. Beyond the prestigious name on my resume, the experience provided clarity about what I did and didn't want in my professional future. I excelled at the analytical aspects of investment banking, earning praise from supervisors for my detailed assessments of sustainable investment opportunities. But the culture of relentless competition and prioritization of profit above all else left me increasingly uncomfortable. During my final performance review, my supervisor noted my technical strengths while raising concerns about what she termed my hesitation in client-facing situations. That's an accurate observation, I acknowledged to my Goldman Sachs supervisor. I believe sustainable investing should prioritize genuine environmental and social impact alongside financial returns. She leaned back in her chair, studying me with a mixture of curiosity and concern. That's an admirable perspective, Rachel, but it may limit your advancement in certain sectors of finance. Have you considered that your talents might be better suited to impact investing firms or even policy roles? Her question wasn't dismissive but genuinely thoughtful, recognizing a misalignment between my values and the traditional investment banking environment. I've been thinking about that a lot, I admitted. This internship has been incredibly valuable precisely because it's helped clarify what I do and don't want in my career. By the time I returned to Northeastern for my senior year, I had narrowed my post-graduation plans. Instead of pursuing the investment banking recruitment path that many of my classmates were targeting, I focused on opportunities in development, finance, ethical banking, and financial policy, roles where my technical skills could serve broader social goals. Professor Chen, who had become both mentor and advocate, supported this redirection. The world has plenty of brilliant minds devoted to maximizing shareholder value, she observed during one of our advisory meetings. We have far fewer committed to redesigning financial systems to serve the majority of humanity. With her encouragement, I applied for a prestigious fellowship with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, a government agency established to safeguard ordinary citizens from predatory financial practices. The position would begin after graduation, offering 2 years of practical experience in financial regulation before I pursued graduate studies. As winter break approached, bringing with it my final semester at Northeastern, I received an unexpected email that would present a profound moral test. The subject line was simple: important real estate opportunity, time sensitive. The message was from Tyler Winston, a former Goldman Sachs colleague now working at a private equity firm. He had remembered my connection to Medford, Massachusetts, and noticed a significant property coming up for auction there, a foreclosure on a luxury home in an exclusive neighborhood called Oak Ridge Estates. "The starting bid is well below market value," Tyler wrote. "Given your local knowledge, you might recognize this as an exceptional investment opportunity. The auction is scheduled for January 15th. I nearly deleted the email as spam until I noticed the property address. With a jolt of recognition, I realized this was the dream house Ethan had been fixated on nearly 2 years ago, the one my father had wisely discouraged him from pursuing as financially out of reach. My first instinct was to forward the information to Ethan. Despite his growing financial responsibility, he and Sophia were still living well within their means in their modest first home. Perhaps now, with his stable job, nearly completed degree, and more mature approach to finances, he might be in a position to consider this property. But something stopped me. Curiosity, perhaps, or a lingering sense that there was more to learn before involving my family. I replied to Tyler requesting additional information: the property specifications, reason for foreclosure, estimated market value versus starting bid, and any known issues with the house. His response came within the hour, complete with detailed attachments and photos. The 5-bedroom home with its gourmet kitchen, home theater, and swimming pool was certainly impressive. The current owners, a surgeon and his wife, had fallen into financial trouble following medical malpractice claims that had destroyed his practice. The starting bid at auction was $425,000 for a property assessed at $780,000. There's approximately $175,000 in needed renovations, Tyler noted. The owners stripped some fixtures and neglected maintenance during their financial struggles. Even accounting for those costs, the potential profit margin is significant. As I scrolled through the images of the marble-countered kitchen and resort-style master bath, I recalled Ethan's enthusiasm when describing this very house 2 years ago. "It's perfect, Dad. 4 bedrooms, fenced yard, finished basement, in the Oak Ridge School District. We could live there for years." I closed my laptop, unsettled by the coincidence and uncertain about my next steps. The ethical path seemed clear: share the information with my brother and let him decide whether to pursue it. Yet something deeper and more complex was emerging in my consciousness, something connected to the still healing wounds of our past. That evening, I called Grandpa to discuss the situation, knowing his ethical clarity and financial wisdom would help me navigate my conflicted feelings. "It's quite a coincidence," he agreed after I'd explained the opportunity. "The question isn't whether you should tell Ethan, of course you should, but whether you have an interest in the property yourself." "Me?" I replied, surprised by his suggestion. "I'm 21, about to graduate. I'm not in a position to buy real estate, let alone a luxury home." "Aren't you?" he challenged gently. "You have substantial resources between your restored college fund, the gift I provided, and your excellent earning potential. The property represents a significant discount to market value. From a purely financial perspective, it's a sound investment regardless of your personal connection to it." His framing forced me to confront an uncomfortable truth. I was automatically discounting myself as a potential buyer, not because of financial reality, but because of ingrained patterns of putting Ethan's desires before my own. I hadn't even considered it as a possibility for myself, I admitted. "That's precisely my point," Grandpa replied. "You've made tremendous progress in recognizing your worth in this family, but there are still moments when you instinctively minimize your own interests. This property represents an opportunity to test whether those old patterns still influence your decisions." After our call, I spent hours analyzing the financials of the potential purchase. With my savings, Grandpa's gift, and a conservative mortgage based on my guaranteed fellowship salary, I could actually afford the property. especially if I rented out several bedrooms to graduate students or young professionals to offset costs during the renovation period. The investment made logical sense, but I still struggled with the emotional implications. Would purchasing a house Ethan had once coveted be perceived as competitive or retaliatory? Would it reopen wounds our family had worked hard to heal? I decided to discuss the situation openly with my parents during winter break, seeking their perspective before approaching Ethan. An interesting ethical dilemma, my father observed after I explained the situation over coffee in their kitchen. Do you want my advice as your father or as a real estate professional? Both, I replied. He nodded thoughtfully. As a real estate agent, I'd say it's an excellent investment opportunity if the property inspection confirms there are no hidden issues beyond the known renovation needs. The location alone ensures it will appreciate over time. And as my father? His expression softened. As your father, I'd say you should make this decision based on your own financial goals and life plans, not on how Ethan might feel about it. His emotional response is his responsibility, not yours. My mother, who had been listening quietly, added her perspective. 2 years ago, this house represented something very different for Ethan. A status symbol he wanted but couldn't afford responsibly. Now he and Sophia have created a lovely home that meets their actual needs. This property might no longer hold the same meaning for him. Their balanced perspective helped clarify my thinking. The next day, I invited Ethan for coffee at a neutral location, a small cafe downtown where we could speak privately. There's a property opportunity I wanted to discuss with you, I began, showing him the listing on my tablet. It's coming up for auction next month. Recognition flickered across his face immediately. That's the Oak Ridge house, the one I was obsessed with 2 years ago. Exactly, I confirmed. I received information about it through a finance connection and wanted to share it with you first, given your previous interest. He studied the listing details, his expression thoughtful rather than immediately covetous, as it might have been in the past. Starting bid is surprisingly low, he observed. There are significant renovation needs, I explained, sharing the additional information Tyler had provided. But even accounting for those costs, it's well below market value. Ethan handed the tablet back to me, his response surprising me completely. It's still not right for us, he said decisively. We've just found out Sophia is pregnant again. We're waiting to tell the family at Christmas. Adding a major renovation project and higher mortgage during this time would be irresponsible. His clear-eyed assessment of his own financial limitations, prioritizing stability for his growing family over property prestige, demonstrated just how far he had come. That's a wise decision, I acknowledged, relieved but also somewhat confused about why I felt a twinge of disappointment. Why are you showing me this? Ethan asked suddenly, his perceptiveness catching me off guard. Are you considering buying it yourself? The direct question forced me to articulate thoughts I'd been hesitant to own fully. I'm analyzing it as an investment opportunity, I admitted, but I wanted to speak with you first, given your history with the property. Understanding dawned in his expression. And you wanted to make sure I wouldn't feel what? Jealous? Resentful? If you pursued it? His insight was uncomfortably accurate. Something like that, I acknowledged. Ethan leaned forward, his gaze direct. Rachel, if you're interested in this property as an investment, you should absolutely pursue it. The fact that you're considering my feelings first, when I used your entire college fund without a second thought about how it would impact you, just highlights the difference in how we've approached our relationship. His self-awareness was another sign of his growth. It's not about keeping score, I said. Maybe it should be, a little, he replied with unexpected candor. Not in a vindictive way, but in recognizing that balance has been missing between us for too long. You've consistently considered my needs and feelings. I'm trying to learn to do the same. As Christmas approached, I continued researching the Oak Ridge property, arranging a private viewing through Tyler's connections, and consulting with contractors about renovation costs. The more I learned, the more convinced I became that it represented a sound investment, regardless of its connection to Ethan. At our family Christmas gathering, Ethan and Sophia announced their pregnancy news as planned, receiving enthusiastic congratulations from everyone. Emma, now understanding enough to grasp the concept of becoming a big sister, alternated between excitement and uncertainty about sharing parental attention. After dinner, as the adults lingered around the table with coffee and my mother's traditional Christmas trifle, I decided to share my news as well. I'm considering a real estate investment, I began, explaining the Oak Ridge property opportunity while carefully avoiding mentioning Ethan's previous interest. The auction is scheduled for January 15th. That's a significant undertaking for someone just completing college, my father observed, though his tone was intrigued rather than discouraging. I've done extensive financial analysis, I assured him. Between my savings, Grandpa's gift, and responsible mortgage planning based on my secured income from the fellowship, the numbers work, especially if I rent out rooms initially while completing renovations. Ethan, true to our cafe conversation, showed nothing but support. Rachel has a solid investment mind, he told the others. If she's done the analysis, I'm confident it's sound. His endorsement, freely given without hint of envy, warmed me more than I had expected. The auction date approached quickly after the holidays. I had arranged financing, completed my due diligence on the property, and developed a clear renovation budget with contingencies built in. Still, as I registered as a bidder, I felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. This would be my first major independent financial decision, one that would shape my post-graduation life in significant ways. I invited Grandpa to accompany me to the auction, valuing both his moral support and his experienced eye for property transactions. We arrived early, securing seats near the front of the hotel conference room where the auction would take place. As other bidders filed in, Grandpa nudged me gently. "Don't look now, but your parents just arrived." I turned, surprised to see my mother and father settling into seats at the back of the room. They hadn't mentioned any intention to attend. When they caught my eye, they offered encouraging waves but maintained their distance, clearly communicating that they were there for support rather than oversight. The auction began promptly at 10 a.m. The auctioneer described the property in glowing terms, highlighting its prime location while acknowledging its need for cosmetic updates, a generous understatement of the required renovations. "We'll start the bidding at $425,000, he announced. "Do I hear $425,000? I raised my bidder card confidently, having mentally prepared for this moment. Another bidder, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit, immediately countered. $450,000, the auctioneer called. "Do I hear $475,000? I raised my card again, sticking to the bidding strategy I'd developed with Grandpa's guidance. The suited man frowned but didn't hesitate to counter. The bidding continued steadily upward. By the time we reached $550,000, several initial bidders had dropped out, leaving just myself, the suited man, and a woman representing what appeared to be a property development company. At $600,000, the woman stopped bidding, leaving only myself and the suited man. My maximum budget was $650,000, a figure I determined would still allow for the necessary renovations while maintaining a reasonable mortgage. $625,000, the auctioneer called after the man raised his card. "Do I hear $650,000? This was my limit. I took a deep breath and raised my card one final time. $650,000, the auctioneer confirmed. "Do I hear $675,000? The suited man consulted, briefly with someone on his phone, then shook his head. $650,000 going once, going twice. Sold to bidder number 37. A surge of exhilaration mixed with momentary panic washed over me. I had just purchased a house. a significant property that would require substantial work and commitment. Grandpa squeezed my hand reassuringly. "Well done," he whispered. "Louise would be so proud." As we completed the initial paperwork, my parents joined us, both beaming with unmistakable pride. "Congratulations, homeowner," my father said warmly. "Your first real estate investment at 21, that's impressive by any standard." "We hope you don't mind us coming," my mother added. "We wanted to be here for this milestone, but we didn't want to intrude on your independence." Their presence, supportive without being controlling, represented exactly the kind of balanced relationship we had all been working toward. 3 months later, after my graduation ceremony, my entire family gathered at the Oak Ridge property for what I was calling a renovation kickoff party. The house, still in its pre-renovation state, was far from showcase ready, with outdated fixtures, worn carpeting, and walls in need of fresh paint. But the bones were solid, the location unbeatable, and most importantly, it was mine, a physical manifestation of my financial independence and adult identity. Ethan, Sophia, and Emma arrived with a potted Meyer lemon tree as a housewarming gift. "It produces fruit year-round with proper care," Sophia explained. "We thought it would be nice to have something growing while you're surrounded by renovation chaos." As Emma raced around exploring the empty rooms, her joy uninhibited by the property's current aesthetic shortcomings, Ethan pulled me aside. "I need to tell you something," he said, his expression unusually serious. "Seeing this house now, knowing you'll be transforming it into your vision, it makes me realize I never actually wanted this specific property." "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. 2 years ago, when I was obsessed with this house, it wasn't about the structure itself, he explained. It was about what it represented: success, status, having arrived in some way I couldn't articulate. I wanted it because it seemed impressive, not because it was right for our family. His insight struck me as remarkably self-aware. "And now?" He smiled, gesturing toward Sophia, who was showing Emma how to carefully water the lemon tree. "Now, I understand that our actual home, the one we've built together, the one that fits our real life rather than some aspirational image, that's what matters. It's not about impressing others, but creating stability for our family." The contrast between his former values and current perspective couldn't have been clearer. "I've been thinking about the college fund situation a lot lately," he continued, lowering his voice to ensure our parents couldn't overhear, "about how I benefited from an unfair system for so long that I couldn't even see it as unfair anymore. It took your standing up to all of us to break that pattern." "We've all grown from that experience," I acknowledged. "But your growth came from your own strength," he countered. "Mine came from being forced to face uncomfortable truths about myself. There's a difference." Before I could respond, Grandpa called everyone to gather in what would eventually become the dining room. He raised his plastic cup of sparkling cider and a toast. "To new beginnings and hard-earned wisdom," Grandpa said, raising his glass higher. "May this house become not just a wise investment, but a true home, built on the foundation of lessons we've all learned together." Everyone raised their glasses, the simple gesture carrying the weight of our shared journey. As I looked around, at my family, each member changed in profound ways since that devastating day I discovered my empty college fund. I felt a sense of completion that transcended the property transaction itself. The renovations began the following week. I had secured a month's gap between graduation and starting my fellowship with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, time I dedicated entirely to the most critical structural updates. My father, putting his real estate expertise to good use, helped coordinate contractors and advised on which improvements would yield the greatest return on investment. Ethan surprised me by showing up every Saturday, dressed in work clothes and ready to tackle whatever physical labor was needed. His accounting skills proved unexpectedly valuable as well. helping me track expenses meticulously against my renovation budget. "You're good at this," I observed one afternoon as we painstakingly removed decades-old wallpaper from what would become my home office. "The physical work, I mean. I never pictured you as the DIY type." He laughed, wiping sweat from his brow. "Neither did I, but there's something satisfying about tangible progress, seeing the direct results of your effort. It's different from the abstract work I do all day." "Speaking of which, how's the degree coming along?" I asked. "Final semester this fall," he replied with evident pride. "Sophia's planning a small graduation party. Nothing extravagant, just family and close friends. Emma's already practicing throwing her paper hat in the air." The image made me smile. My niece mimicking graduation traditions she couldn't possibly understand yet, but instinctively recognizing them as celebrations of achievement. By the time I moved to Washington, D.C. for my fellowship, the Oak Ridge house had been transformed, from neglected foreclosure to promising investment property. The essential renovations were complete, and I had secured 3 responsible tenants, all young professionals with steady incomes and excellent references, who would occupy the extra bedrooms while I was away, covering most of the mortgage. My first year at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau proved even more fulfilling than I had anticipated. The work was challenging and deeply meaningful, focused on developing regulations that would protect ordinary citizens from the predatory lending practices that had contributed to the foreclosure crisis. Each policy I helped shape, each safeguard we established, felt connected to my personal journey, translating my family's painful experience into broader protection for others. During one particularly intense project analyzing discrimination, in home lending, my supervisor commented on my unusual dedication. "Most fellows treat this as a resume-building stepping stone," she observed. "You approach it like a personal mission." "In some ways, it is," I admitted. "Financial systems have real consequences in people's lives. I've seen firsthand how inequality can be embedded in everyday transactions, even within families." I returned to Massachusetts for Ethan's graduation that December, a crisp winter afternoon with early snowflakes swirling around the campus as he crossed the stage to receive his long-delayed diploma. Emma, now 4, clapped enthusiastically, while trying to balance the miniature graduation cap Sophia had made for her. Their second child, a son named James, slept peacefully in my mother's arms, bundled against the cold. At the modest celebration afterward, held in their comfortably lived-in family home rather than an expensive restaurant, Ethan clinked his glass to gather everyone's attention. "I want to thank you all for your support," he began, his expression unusually solemn. Especially Rachel. Surprised to hear my name, I looked up from where I'd been helping Emma assemble a graduation-themed craft. When I dropped out of college 7 years ago, I was convinced formal education was unnecessary, that I could charm and improvise my way to success, Ethan continued. Rachel showed me a different path, one of discipline, purpose, and genuine achievement rather than shortcuts. He raised his glass in my direction. "To my sister, whose example inspired me to finish what I started, and whose courage changed our family for the better." The acknowledgement, public and unequivocal, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. The journey from being the overlooked, taken-for-granted daughter to being recognized as a positive influence had been long and sometimes painful. Yet in that moment, I recognized that the transformation wasn't just about receiving long overdue recognition, but about all of us growing into healthier versions of ourselves. That night, back at my Oak Ridge house where the family was staying during their visit, I found myself alone in the kitchen with Grandpa. At 86, he moved more slowly, now but remained sharp-minded and perceptive. "You've come full circle," he observed, watching me prepare tea for both of us. "From having your college fund taken to owning a significant property that's already appreciating in value. But the financial reversal isn't the most important part, is it?" "No," I agreed. handing him his favorite chamomile blend. The real change is internal, in how I value myself, in how our family functions, in the boundaries we've established. Grandpa nodded approvingly. Louise always said money itself isn't what matters. It's what money represents, the choices it enables, the security it provides, the values it reflects when properly stewarded. As we sipped our tea in comfortable silence, I contemplated how differently everything might have unfolded if I hadn't discovered my empty college fund that day, if I hadn't found the courage to confront the pattern of inequality, if my family hadn't been willing to acknowledge their part in an unfair system. The house around us, with its renovated spaces, carefully selected finishes, and solid investment value, was more than property. It was tangible evidence that standing up for oneself didn't have to destroy relationships, but could instead transform them into something healthier and more balanced. Sometimes, the greatest gift we can offer those we love is the courage to demand fairness, even when it disrupts comfortable patterns. And sometimes, what appears to be a devastating financial betrayal can become the catalyst for profound growth, not just for ourselves, but for everyone brave enough to face the uncomfortable truths it reveals. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.